Friday the 18th of December 2025. That means, therefore, only one thing. It's Formula One Fridays, and we're going to dissect for it. There's some techie things upcoming, and I don't mind going scorched earth on this Friday as always. I talked about Carlos Sainz Jr. earlier, but I'm going to talk about him again because he's getting on my nerves. And I love me some Carlos Sainz Jr. We were rooting for you, sir. Where is Alex Albon? Oh, yeah, that's right. He's so far down the road, Carlos Sainz Jr., that you can't see him. And you want to talk about clickbait, Carlos Sainz Jr., from your £1 million house in Madrid or Monaco or wherever it is in the world, whilst Gazzetta dello Sport just want to post a cheeky Instagram post with a view to make some... How very dare you, Carlos Sainz Jr. You disappoint me, sir. Where is Alex Albon, mate? I disagree so vehemently with this. Listen, I wanted to touch on it very briefly, but I am triggered. It is insane to me that Carlos Sainz Jr. is sitting here talking about grazie for el clickbait. What are you on about, Carlos Sainz Jr.? You're a multi-millionaire, sir. I take exception to that. And you know what? I wouldn't mind so much if Carlos Sainz was Bill Belichick's settings doing his job, but he's not. Of course, you should extend him some grace, right? The very same extent of grace that he should extend to Gazzetta dello Sport, who are just doing their job. Bill Belichick settings, the exact thing that Carlos Sainz Jr. is not doing. How very dare he open his mouth and extend the make more the extent to which F1 does one of these, us and them. You can come in only if you bring money. That's techier than techie thing. I disagree so much with that from Carlos. It really, genuinely, it really upsets me. I only wanted to touch on it again, but he brings me back in. Just when I was thought I was out, he brings me back in, Carlos Sainz Jr. And I love you, sir. I'm rooting for you, chap. I wanted you to beat Charles Leclerc, but for that bloody pothole in Las Vegas, you might have done it. Put some respect on Carlos Sainz's name. Gritty, technical feedback, the Sainz effect. Every time he comes to a team, he makes the team better. They're closer to the Constructors' Championship title than they were before Carlos Sainz joined. He has that level of nous and race IQ, that ability to set up a car, the ability to see the F1 wood for the F1 trees. He's Adrian Newey in a set of racing overalls, some say. I like the guy. But when he starts talking about clickbait, how very bloody dare you? What are we doing, Carlos Sainz Jr.? You know, and again, like I said at the outset, it wouldn't be so bloody bad if you, sir, were doing your job. Oh, and by the way, we'll talk about Ferrari. We will talk about Max Verstappen. So too, we'll talk about Carlos Sainz or Guenther Steiner even, who chose to take the Scuderia Ferrari name, the red car with the yellow badge and black prancing horse atop in vain. Oh, the humanity. It's going to get techie. Lose was Diddy. Oh no, are we doing that really? Stain Steiner, it's Friday. What's going on, Safak, Isa, Turtle Dove sending you love and guidance and thoughts. It's going to get techier than techie things over the next 30 to 40 minutes, where we try and go long, back and forth, modes of F1 discourse each and every single time. Here's what you need to know about Scuderia Ferrari. They upgraded. We talked about it ever so slightly earlier on, but the context is this. That car has been a dog. Nothing if not an SH1T box all season. It was Lewis Hamilton's time who was going to come there. And again, they were close last year, right? Fastest car on the grid, some say, as at Abu Dhabi, the season finale. They were only 14 points adrift in the constructors of the papaya coloured car. And that has to mean something. Therefore, surely they just needed to continue along that trajectory, and then we'd be talking about a Constructors' Championship in real time in 2025. Surely. Well, not so fast. Frederick Vasseur said, nah, you know what we're going to do? We're going to bark up a different design philosophy tree. Incremental gains is not what we're after. We're going in all or nothing settings. Let's change 99% of the car. Let's do the pull rod at the front, the thing that we didn't do historically, which they should have done. The meta was set by Adrian, and they chose not to, changing it up and changing all of the main components shortly thereafter, because you need to. Again, oldest truism in F1 history per Adrian Newey in his God tier book, How to Build a Car, is that these things like suspension and ride heights and aerodynamics do not operate in silos. You need to make sure, you need to build them in conjunction with one another. They need to be in harmony. That was the alter at which Mercedes in 2022 felt. And that now apparently is the alter at which Scuderia Ferrari, the red car with the black prancing horse atop the yellow badge, is failing. Now, what are we doing, chat? How could Frederick Vasseur be so naive? Doesn't even make sense. But now apparently at Mugello, they tested some things. Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, to a lesser extent, have been crying out for these upgrades. Upgrade, make the suspension more rigid, give me the confidence using which I can go through a Maggots or Beckett's and take high minimum speed through their turns, or a Spa-Francorchamps coming up next weekend, by the way. Eau Rouge settings, give me the pace. I don't want to hear about lift and coast. How are we a Scuderia Ferrari, an F1 team, and you're telling me that I need to lift and coast to make sure I don't wear away the plank excessively? Is this a DT project? Is this a universe? Are we an F1 team or a bloody tiddlywink? Like, what are we doing here? This is basics, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury. Oh, Charles Edward, you're an absolute legend. Killer Cameron, what's up? What happened to the weekly drops? Nasha and Baxty show coming back soon. Gotta say, you're not a fan of back-to-back summer week, but I'm not a fan of you back-to-back summer breaks. I agree with you. Chat, what's up? New rear suspension, gonna do something all up in spoken mirrors. Charles Edwards, you're an absolute Charles Edward Cheese. Put some respect on his name. You're an absolute legend, and I'm grateful ad infinitum, sir, for your support in perpetuity. Genuinely, words betray the extent to which I'm grateful, mate. But go on then to your question, Charles Edward. Is this going to make a difference substantively? Well, I don't know. No way of knowing for sure, right? Listen, if past his prologue, I would argue that this would probably be another Trojan horse, like another misdirection. It looks good on paper. The fact that they're amending for the flaws, that the fairings are in there now. But are they going to nail it? Every time they say this, ultimately amounts to nothing. So again, if past his prologue, I couldn't think that Ferrari are going to be at the top of the grid again just because of this upgrade. I think the car terminal is the wrong word, but I think they've built it with a view to operate it low, right? If it can't get close to the ground, then again, it's a Mercedes W13 2022 settings, not purposing, but again, it loses all of its god tier. It's not optimized. Now, what they've done with these upgrades, rumor on the F1 curb says, is they've optimized for that operating window. They've broadened it, made it more flexible and therefore more adaptable. Lewis Hamilton says that potentially these upgrades could work. Charles Leclerc says so too, but we'll have to see. Charles Edward, do you know what I mean? We will have to see, Charles Edward Cheese. That's the truth. We'll see at Spa-Francorchamps, because here's why. F1 history doesn't repeat, but sometimes it does rhyme. You'll remember a couple of years ago at this race, I want to say 22 or 23, the legend that is Break F1 made a video post the Spa-Francorchamps Grand Prix accusing his old team Red Bull of sandbagging. Specifically, what were they doing? Well, they'd set their car up too low, and the risk that they were running was material of what? Excessive plank wear. Again, it's a fine line to traverse if you're an F1 team in 2025. You want to run the car super low, as did Scuderia Ferrari with Lewis's car in China, but you don't want to run it too low to where it infringes upon the rules and you run the risk of a disqualification. That's what happened to Sir Lewis in China, the Grand Prix proper. Some say that's why he was so quick in the Chinese Grand Prix sprint. Some say absolutely. Thank you, Charles. Safak, you're a lad. Thank you as well, Safak. Legendary settings and far too generous. You both are, Safak and Charles Edward Cheese. So that's why then some say Lewis was so fast in the Chinese sprint Grand Prix that both of them were running their cars far too low. But do they check for the ride height and the excessive plank wear post a sprint? Do they? Non-rhetorical question. I'm guessing that they don't have the infrastructure, the logistical bandwidth to do so, but they do check after the bloody Grand Prix proper, and that's why Lewis got disqualified, because of excessive plank wear. Now, roll that forward. Again, it was Red Bull in 2022, I want to say, but because of the compression going through Spa, Eau Rouge in particular, they were going to wear through they were going to infringe on excessive plank wear again. So what did they tell Checo Perez and Maximilian Verstappen? Through the compression point Eau Rouge, Lyco, lift and coast with a view to mitigate the extent to which they were wearing down their plank. Ferrari all season have been telling, you'll recall, Lewis and Charles, LICO. LICO stands for lift and coast, meaning therefore that they were wary of the extent to which they were wearing away their planks and keen not to get DQ'd, just like they both did, by the way, for different things at the Chinese Grand Prix this year. Oh, the humanity. Here's hoping it could work. We will talk about Ferrari more a little bit later because there is more Guenther Steiner talking about it on the Business of Sport podcast. Oh, and by the way, if we're talking about Maximilian Verstappen's contract, some people are saying that it might not be so easy because Max does have a contract. Lest we forget that he signed a contract through to 2028 on the back of his maiden Drivers' Championship victory in 2021. That contract sees Maximilian Verstappen go through to 2028. That's techie, ladies and gentlemen, because there is such a thing called the Contract Recognition Board, writes Planet F1, and there are rules and regs about getting out of those contract precedents too. Lest we forget Jenson Button, BAR Williams, lest we forget Carlos Reutemann Williams, lest we forget Michael Schumacher getting out of his Jordan contract with a view to join Benetton. I mean, this is if past his prologue, these things always happen, right? Contract disputes. More recently, Oscar Piastri, bloody Alpine reserve driver, and then all of a sudden hadn't signed a contract apparently and becomes a McLaren driver. This is techie. Maximilian Verstappen, writes Planet F1, can't just click his fingers. You can't just leave Red Bull because he doesn't fancy it, because they're underperforming. He needs an out. There are two potential ways that he can get out of his contract. One is financial resources. Planet F1 writes that the figure that somebody would have to pay to get Maximilian Verstappen out of his contract as of 2025, July of, is somewhere in the region of £100 million. What? That's a lot of money, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury. And then probably pay in remuneration per annum Max Verstappen, four-time champion, another £100 million per year. In his first year then, financial resources of whatever team is seeking to acquire Max Verstappen, the hit to their operating profit will be £200 million. No wonder, therefore, Toto needed to get the approval of the chair and the board and everybody else that's a C-suite exec level bod. 200 million in the first season. And what happens shortly thereafter? How much are you going to have to pay him? And what are you going to have to give up as far as sponsorship responsibilities, as far as his involvement with GT Racing and his sim racing team, Verstappen.com, red line settings? What are you going to have to give up? The extent to which Toto will have to move mountains to get this done, I think is only being laid bare in real time. Plus, Red Bull aren't short for some cash. You know already that 3.2 billion is how much they made as a racing team in revenue last year. 11 billion is how much the energy drinks company, the parent, made last year. 11 billion revenue. Listen, you're going to have to throw some money at this. They're not exactly short for cash, are they, Red Bull? And that's why I think it's going to get techier than techie things. Can Maximilian Verstappen, I think, potentially, Mercedes might not be able to afford this. Imagine that they can pay it, but they won't want to because it would lead to some very different conversation at the next AGM. Yeah, no worry. We spent 200 million on Maximilian Verstappen. How are we going to make that back? Well, I don't know. He'll win a few championships. Do you know what I mean? 3-4 year payback period, and then we might see some upside to our bottom line. That, ladies and gentlemen, is not an MPV that will wash at the AGM of Mercedes F1 ever. Toto cannot have that conversation. The payback period will need to be shorter than that. He will need to see some upside. He doesn't want another Sir Lewis Hamilton going across the Ferrari, 100 million some say, and not a victory to be seen yet. Now that's not Lewis's fault, of course it's not. That's in no small part due to the SF25 not being a good enough vehicle, but yeah, and still that doesn't matter when you get to the bloody shareholder meet, the AGM, and have to justify your performance or lack thereof to the board. Nobody cares for the T's and C's, the footnotes and the appendices. What's happened? Where is the performance? Why isn't it there? Why were we 14 points behind in the championship last year and now we're 191? what's happened, and you've got Lewis Hamilton in the car, and we're fighting for second place with a Mercedes who have as one of their team, their drivers, a rookie, and Red Bull who have only one driver capable of scoring. But it's going to get techie, I'm telling you. The buyout there for 100 million. What are we doing here? I think Maximilian Verstappen, again, if we're talking the line of least resistance, might need himself a performance clause or two to come into effect as at the end of the summer break. Lest we forget he's close. Some say, the most reputable of sources are saying, if Max is lower than third in the championship or go fourth or lower, then he'll have as at the summer break in 2 races time, then he'll have himself something that he can do, null and void his contract in real time. But then rumour and word on the F1 curb is still circulating around the constructors that if Red Bull are less than third, lower than third in the championship, fourth or lower, then apparently he's got himself a stipulation that he can leverage to with a view to get out of his contract. It just depends. One of these weird ones. It depends on who you speak to when. Oh, and by the way, let's talk about Guenther Steiner. Because the outspoken man from Italy, the German-speaking Italian, has said some things about the Italian team, and it's gone techier than techie things as far as Scuderia Ferrari on Twitter and their reaction. How very dare they? They're saying, don't think Toto Wolff would be interested if he didn't have Max a get-out clause that he's close to triggering. It makes no sense. I suppose that's why they're having a conversation in real time, Lindsay. Ferrari always do this, though. They come back in the second half of the season, but the damage, it's not a bad shout. As far as their performance over the course of the season, they do what Red Bull do over the course of a race weekend day. Initially, they look rubbish, and then all of a sudden, they come to the fore. Spa is near, thank God. I know it's been a long couple of weeks, so it's getting tricky. I really can't see him leaving for Merc next year, says Turtle. The pertinent portion of that clause is next year, eh? That might be the piece. It feels like more and more, the more that I read, the more that I listen to a James Allen on the Red Flags podcast, the more that I listen to the God Tieriest once Peter D wins a friend of the channel. Of course, it sounds like the smart thing to do for Max, if we're playing sensible games, is to sit on the sidelines and wait. Not a sabbatical necessarily, but maybe just chill out in the Red Bull for another 12 months and then see where the land lies on the back of the new rules and regs in 2026 and then make your play. It's not as if he'll be wanting. Not going to be left on the sideline. Any F1 team currently on the grid would kill to sign Maximilian Verstappen, so he can take his pick, right? Much like Alain Prost did in 1993. Just wait. Oh, Nigel Mansell won in 1992, yeah, in this god tier Adrian Newey designed Williams. Well, I'll have some of that in 1993. Do you know what I mean? Just retire and go away for a little bit, and then just come back and take your pick of the litter. You've passed this prologue. That might be the shout. It's going to get taken. Do you think Max could trigger his performance clause if he really wants out? I think not, but who knows? No, those aren't the stipulations, Turtle, as I understand them. It's very, there are covenants. There are things that need to be satisfied. And apparently there are two legs to those covenants, 2 stipulations as far as performance clauses. If Max is going to be able to, during the summer break, null and void his contract through to 2028, meaning therefore the constructors, if Red Bull are lower than third, meaning fourth or lower, or in the drivers, if he's lower than second, some say if he's lower than third, aka fourth or lower, it's going to get to, tricky. It's going to, maybe Toto just buys him. I don't know. Who knows, eh? Go on, let me tell you about Guenther Steiner now, because it's techier than techie things. Guenther Steiner went on a podcast and he said some things, but let me set the context thus around Lewis Hamilton and Scuderia Ferrari, because Lewis Hamilton is the 7-time champion. GOAT setting, some say, Mount Rushmore of F1, first round Hall of Fame each and every single time. I was talking to somebody about Lewis Hamilton the other day, and I still can't believe for the life of me why Max and Lewis fans, I understand why, let me not be naive, but Lewis was to me, as an F1 peddler, everything that Max is now. When you see me losing my mind at a Max Verstappen qualify, that's everything that I was doing off camera to Lewis in 2007. When Lewis first came to F1, I was like, who? How? There was this massive promise, but surely they're rarely able to deliver upon the Hulkenberg, the same thing, right? When Hulkenberg first came into F1, you check his resume. not dissimilar to that of Lewis and Max. Barely a feeder formula did they enter and lose. They were just like perpetual winners. They had the record. Hulkenberg was the same, but Hulkenberg is the rule. Lewis Hamilton the exception. It's rare that they come in on this wave of promise and potential and then deliver upon it, especially so soon as Sir Lewis Hamilton. So all the reactions on Max, and maybe you want to argue that what Max is doing is crazier because he doesn't have the cut, whatever. But it's a difference in millimeters and not it's extents and not kinds. Do you know what I mean? Lewis, when he first came in, it was like, what? No, surely he can't be that. He is that good. Oh my goodness. When Lewis first came in, all of the reactions, all of the astonishment about Max's god tier excellence and sporting endeavour, like it was mad. It was like he's doing things, the bloody three wide on Maggots and Beckett's, Pizzioni and PK GP. To go and watch it if you haven't already. It was chaos, absolute chaos. So it always astounds me that Max and Lewis fans can't coexist. I think it's the fan bases that get at each other. But when you look at the drivers in isolation, I mean, they're very different. They are very different, but they're also very bloody similar, particularly when Lewis was in his pomp and some of the things that he was able to do that he shouldn't have been doing. And I've always got to pay Lewis Hamilton respect in that sense. Not glaze. It's not glaze if it's bloody true. I've always got to give him some credit. However, of late, it's been techier than techie things for Lewis. Here's the context. The last couple of years, the performance hasn't been where it was. This isn't 2008 anymore, nor is it 2014 or 2007. It's not 2018. Lewis Hamilton is different as a driver and as a person, and it'd be disingenuous, unrealistic, and Abbott of Unreason. Only an Abbott of Unreason could expect it to be the same. He's older, he's wiser, more acutely aware of risk management. I don't even want to have the conversation about past his prime. That's a non sequitur. It doesn't matter. But is Lewis Hamilton different now in 2025 to what he was in 2018? 1,000 gazillion percent. He has to be. Somebody said to me the other day, if you are the same person at 50 that you were at 20, then you have lit. And Muhammad Ali quote, check this out, John, you're a legend. Look at me coming in. John Ferry, you're a legend. Muhammad Ali said on an interview, a David Frost interview, words of wisdom settings. If you are the same man at 50 that you were at 20, then you have lived and wasted 30 years of your life. So you think Lewis Hamilton's going to come into F1 in 2007, hang around for his knees makes no difference, 20 years, a couple of years shy at 17, 18. You think he's going to be in F1 that long and be the same person? He cannot be the same person. He's lived too much life. And herein lies the dilemma, the paradox of the Lewis Hamilton circumstance, because the context over the past 24 months has been techie. Lest we forget, in 2022, Lewis Hamilton begged before that season Toto to keep Valtteri Bottas, a dude with whom Lewis always blended, didn't cause any troubles, was quick enough to be dangerous, but not dangerous enough to trouble Lewis Hamilton as far as the Drivers' Championship. And some veterans, mention no names, friend of the channel Peter Windsor, would always put forth that is the modus operandi. That's the line of least resistance if you want to win championships. The one that Michael Schumacher was overweight invested in. Prioritize. You have an A and a B. There is a number one and a number two, an A side and a B side in every team. If indeed you want to win races and championships of the drivers' variety, F1 is difficult enough without the team making it more complicated by dint of its driver dynamic. Mention no names, Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna in 88 and 89. Mention no names, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, soon to be in 2025. Here's what I mean though. The context over the past 24 months for Lewis and Mercedes got techie. Allow me to recount some of the exhibits over the past 24 months. Qualifying performance not been so great for Sir Lewis, especially if you consider the context, the backdrop of his qualifying performance in a previous life. You could not beat that dude, for the avoidance of doubt, if he'd had his Weetabix. George came on. Lewis Hamilton, despite Lewis Hamilton begging for them to keep Valtteri Bottas, notwithstanding his poor performance, championship altering poor performance in 2021. Then you've got Toto, the boy who cried wolf's comment. And they are techie. They're multitudinous. Each and every single one of them techie. And we'll go through them. Cam, are you really going to glaze Maximilian a little bit less? Like you said, it's not Benzi. I reframe this. It's not glazing if it's true. You hear the way I talk about Lewis. Is that glazing of Lewis? If it's excellence, it's excellence. I'm not going to come on here and tell you. It would be disingenuous of me to come on here and tell you that up is down. You can get that some places. Do you know what I mean? Political commentaries, but I can't do it on here. You'd call me out. It wouldn't land. I wouldn't be able to stick the dismount. 9 times out of 10, I'm a thinking shooter, but I will shoot straight. I can't do anything other than that, and that doesn't mean I'm going to bat 1,000, but I will pass the Mendoza lines. You know what I mean? If Max shows something nice again, Cam will screw up the glazer. I can't outlaw. If he go on, then let's talk about this before we talk about. Let's get into it. If Max goes and gaps Alonso in sector 3 in Monaco in qualifying to the tune of 3/10, what do you think I'm gonna do? What do you? I guess my reaction to that is one of the ways that many of you found this channel, because many wanted to underplay it, but Matt Bishop did. Matt Bishop came out straight away. God tier Matt Bishop, friend of the channel, and said, listen, that's the best sector 3 that I've ever seen. And he's been around F1 a very long time. Editor of F1 magazine, the F1 Racing magazine, bloody chief communications officer of McLaren and Aston Martin once upon a time. And he said that was one of the best sectors that he'd ever seen. How? Outlaw, it's not glazing. It's truth sake. There you go, Outlaw. Now we've got the proper terminology. Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Ayrton Senna. It's truth glazing. I dine at the restaurant of Sporting Endeavour par excellence. I'm allergic to anything else. Do you know what I mean? It would have me dial out. It would have me dial out of the sport that we so know and love, called the one that F's. Go on and let me tell you about this context before I tell you what Steiner said. The haters got to Cam Over, who you wanted to know. No, Michael, I can't. You'll see the short. I can't. Somebody does something incredible, I will react. It just so happens that one of the only dudes to be so metronomic in his incredible feats, in his sport, in his very unique brand of F1 Sporting Endeavour par excellence, has a name. And his name is Maximilian Verstappen, full sensation to be fine toy champion. Go on, let me tell you about this context of the Guenther Steiner thing, because this is important. Lest we forget, I know some of us have short memories, abbots of unreasoned settings, choosing instead to disbelieve the evidence of our own eyes and ears, but not me. Can't do it. Not ever. Will never ever sacrifice truth value nor objectivity at the altar of partisanship, cognitive bias, or confirmation bias even, nor any other cognitive dissonance worthy of the moniker. Here's what's happened with Sir Lewis going into this year, and this is important because lots of people have chosen to forget and ignore. Lewis Hamilton is now 40 years old, and irrespective of how much you love or loathe Sir Lewis, Father Time is undefeated, undisputed, pound for pound, has never lost a round. It is a matter of time, not if, but when, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury. If you believe Lewis Hamilton is still in his prime, then that's up to you. I've got oceanfront property to sell you in Arizona. If that's what you're doing, then I do have oceanfront property to sell you in Arizona. I promise you. If that's the level of naivety that you want to indulge in, then cool. But for the avoidance of doubt, the context is key before we get into glazing here. Let's go. I won't glaze. Here's what you need to know. Over the past 24 months, it's gotten techier than techie things for Sir Lewis. So dominant for so long was he as an F1 driver and as an entity, as a marketing behemoth. These are unusual circumstances, unfamiliar waters within which he now wades. Quali performance was poor. Most of the mistakes we've gone through coming in the final sector, meaning therefore something was going on with the tyres, attention span, et al. George Russell, a fire-breathing dragon, beat Sir Lewis in 2 of the 3 seasons that they raced in the same team. Techie. Toto's comments, and he had a couple of them, didn't he? Sly jabs at his old mate Sir Lewis, with whom he still discusses dates and dating choices. By the way, they are still friends, irrespective of the water that's gone under the bridge, irrespective of the fact that Lewis surprised Toto with his decision to move Ferrari To which Toto said, why now? Just before 26, when we're going to have a God tier pat, why now, Lewis? Toto was surprised, but yeah, and still, Toto, even though they're friends, he had some words to say, didn't he? Everyone has a shelf life. Toto said, you'll recall, mental acuity is a thing in Formula One, affected by age. That they're doing something to my tyres, said Lewis. What's going on with my pressures? Maybe they turned down the engine in quali. Every time I get into FP, I'm the fastest on purple sectors. But then as soon as I get into quali, they're doing something to my car. Lewis Hamilton's words last year, not mine. The tyre pressures weren't right. You remember when they asked him, is George Russell the one to lead the team back to the mountaintop to win some championships, the drivers and constructors variety? And Lewis Hamilton did one of these. Extended pause, silence, as if he had to ponder his response. It wasn't quick fire. It wasn't an instant yes from Sir Lewis. It was rumination. It was something that he had to think about, as if the answer to that question was a difficult one. You remember also, Lewis Hamilton said, I'll never out-qualify George, insinuating, triggering Cole LH to leverage conspiracy theories. This all happened last year. It was insinuation central. Cole LH on Twitter pulled no punches, came for Mercedes, and some might forgive them because Sir Lewis shouldn't be losing to Sir Lewis. That's the image. If I talk to Mama Cameron, a die-hard Cole LH member, Mama Cameron was saying, no, this isn't right. Lewis can't lose to George. Who's George? And that, of course, was destabilising for the team. You know as much because of late they've come out and said, members of the boys and girls from Brackley and Brixworth, Mercedes bods have been saying that since Lewis Hamilton has gone, the team feels different. It is now more streamlined, now more stress-free, that they can breathe non-Colt LH air, that they can push their shoulders back, that they can go out and focus on the business of being a very, very fast F1 team. And then today, you get the Business of Sport podcast, and Guenther Steiner came out and said some things talking about Lewis joining Scuderia Ferrari and redressing the balance between the two, the balance of power. Here's what, and this is where we're going to have an argument, chat. Here's where it gets techier than techie things. Here's what Guenther Steiner said, and he's talking about the glitz and glamour that comes with Formula One. Again, at this point in 2025, are they not synonymous? Are they not one entity? Can you split the glitz and glam from F1? Can there be F1 in 2025 without a Drive to Survive? Without the marketing behemoth that is a Lewis or a Max or a Shot or a Lando? Can you separate the star athlete from the athletic endeavour? I'm not sure you can. I'm not sure that that's not an exercise in futility. If I'm being honest, in 2025, the beast that F1 has become, I'm not sure, chat. Can you say to Lewis Hamilton, when he says to you that I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman, ergo it's Lewis Hamilton PLC. Can you call him out on that? I don't think you can. I don't think you can. I think you must not. On the contrary, mon ami, here's what Guenther Steiner said on the Business of Sport podcast. Link will be in the description. Quote, it's a combination. And again, we've got the perfect example here in Formula One. The only one above the team is Sir Lewis Hamilton. Oh, the humanity. He's gone and said it already, hasn't he? The only one above the team is Sir Lewis Hamilton. What do you call his presence, his stature? He's very big outside of the sport as well. You're big in the sport, but then when you get big outside of the sport, you're bigger than the actual team. Oh, the humanity. The sacrilege. The Scuderia Ferrari, the red car with a yellow badge and black prancing horse atop. Blasphemy. To which all of the Ferrari buds, the diehards, the tifosi, the guys and girls who live and breathe for the red car, who are all about those who came before, the Michael Schumachers et al., the Gilles Villeneuves, those type of ones. All of those who came before will be Enzo Ferrari, you'll imagine, will be turning his grave at Guenther Steiner. The Italian, the German-speaking Italian. What are you talking about? They went crazy on Twitter. This is nonsense. How very dare you revoke Guenther Steiner's F1 pimp card? There was, because nobody is bigger than the Scuderia. Nobody can be. If you try to be, then you will fail. Anybody that can, Eddie Irvine as an example, he thought that he was bigger than the team, but he was not. And how did that work out? For a while there, Fernando Alonso thought that he was bigger than Ferrari, and how did that work out for him? Seb Vettel thought that Vettel even thought that he was bigger than, and how did that work out for him? Nobody the Tifosi say is bigger than the team, but if you look at the numbers, check the stats. Lewis Hamilton might be, maybe not bigger. This is the difference in extent and not kinds. As big though, you saw what Lewis Hamilton did to the Scuderia Ferrari numbers. You saw the Instagram post, the unprecedented level of engagement. You know that Lewis Hamilton is a business, not a business comma man, not a businessman. You understand that Lewis Hamilton PLC, the symbiosis of the aforementioned with Scuderia Ferrari, and what it means not just for Scuderia but for F1. A rising Lewis Hamilton tide floats all F1, but that's just the truth. Guenther Steiner continues. It's the same in football. It happens so in Formula One. The only one who can claim that one being bigger than the team and the sport is Lewis Hamilton at the moment. Max is very big in the sport, but he doesn't work on being somebody outside of the sport, because for him, his life is racing, while Lewis has got other things going on as well, what he wants to achieve in his life. Guenther continues, quote, and we see it now with Lewis and Ferrari. They are two huge brands together, and it's almost sometimes a conflict. Who is bigger, comma, Ferrari or Lewis? Non-rhetorical question, chap. Either humanity. I don't know the answer to that question. If you're talking about, you've got to define the parameters. What does it mean to be bigger? Are you talking longevity? Well, Ferrari are the only team to have raced in every season in F1 history in its 75-year illustrious history, all the way back to 1950, the very first Grand Prix at Silverstone, run by Mr. Ascari at the altar of Juan Manuel Fangio's, his car's reliability issues. I mean, how can you, like, if longevity is a thing, then surely Ferrari are the brand, right? Luxury brand, no longer sports car brand, transcending the sports, some say. But if you're talking about how bright Lewis Hamilton's marketing flame is burning now, has burnt over the past 10 years, potentially you might think that Lewis Hamilton, brand Hamilton, is bigger, brighter, of more consequence. Maybe it, honestly, chat, it's techier than techie things. This, I think we have ourselves an argument, a moot of sorts that could take us through the night. EasyG says, give Lewis the car and he's cooking the grid, the entire grid. Give him a dominant car, EasyG. Be more precise, EasyG. What are you saying? Give him the best car or just a car that suits. He's very unique now, handling dynamic dams, front endy. Andrew says, made it late. You're a legend. Honestly, Andrew, you're an absolute legend. What's Ross saying? You guys will go back over. Yeah, I don't think Verstappen is soon to be anything but stuck at a fully self-imploded Red Bull. Wow. Well, let's see. Let's have this conversation, Rob, in 24 months' time. I think a lot can change between now and then. Did that new suspension they tried at home do well? So apparently, EasyG, if we're talking about Ferrari's suspension and the test at Mugello, some say that it was worth anywhere up to a tenth or two. No, but I hate it when they say a tenth or two, because what does that mean? A tenth or two is very different per Maximilian Verstappen a couple of years ago at Monaco, around, let's say, sector 3, as versus Spa-Francorchamps. They're different lengths of track, right? So you want to do it as a percentage of the time it takes to navigate the track. 0.1 doesn't mean anything. 0.1, well, Max Verstappen is anywhere between 0.2 and 0.3 quicker than the rest of the grid. Around what track? The percentage times mean more. They're more useful as a metric, but I just don't know. Brand Ferrari might be more durable, but Lewis is a living legend. I don't disagree, Benzi. He's not, but as a driver and as a marketing entity, I mean, brand Hamilton in some symbiosis with Scuderia, you don't get much stronger than that, I don't think. But no, I think Guenther makes a point, to be fair. It's controversial and people will disagree with it, especially die-hard Maximilian Verstappen fans. I mean, bloody Nora, techier than techie things each and every single time. I cannot wait. The next couple of weeks, in fact, the next week before Spa-Francorchamps is going to get chaotic. There were lots of questions to be answered and asked therefore not least of which Maximilian Verstappen's next movements. You'll recall legendary Matt Bishop of F1 Racing so long ago, Aston Martin, so too McLaren, now of Motorsport magazine, formerly of the aforementioned parishes. Matt Bishop said that there's a couple of things that are going to happen. Most likely, if you're playing probability games, most likely Maximilian Verstappen will want to wrap up his future. Oh, and by the way, before I get to this, Guenther Steiner said as well of Red Bull's circumstance that they have to be acutely aware now more than ever that if they lose Maximilian Verstappen, that they will be last on the grid, that they will be nowhere. And if you want proof of that, if you doubt that assertion, you don't need to get the second driver right. Tsunoda, where is he? Where is he? He's last. He hasn't scored points for as near as makes no difference. 5 races. Where is he? Matt Bishop says if you want to see how quick a car is, then you only need to check out what the second driver is doing. And Tsunoda-san, Lawson, Ricciardo before Checo, they've all been nowhere for the longest time in perpetuity without it's nonsense. So what do they think is going to happen? Guenther Steiner, in other news, water is still wet. What are you talking about, sir? If Max Verstappen leaves, there is no Red Bull. You could argue the case already after Horner leaving, but if Horner and Max and Marshall and Newey and Wheatley leave, Red Bull ceases to exist. Like it's a very different racing team from anything that we've seen since 2005. Oh, and by the way, you recall, this is important here, going into the next couple of weeks, the next 4 weeks even, that Matt Bishop penned the article that we went through yesterday, Motorsport magazine, one of the god-tieriest ones, man who was sat beside Christian Horner at the funeral of the legend that is Eddie Jordan, that Matt Bishop said that he thinks a couple of things are going to happen. The Max Verstappen over the next couple of weeks, over the course of the summer break, will need to make himself a decision, an effectful change if he's going to do it, because he will want this whole saga wrapped up before Zandvoort, his whole Grand Prix, where his contingent, his natives, his fellow Dutchmen, where they will be at to celebrate that, the papal white smoke. Do you know what I mean? He'll want that to be a celebration. Ergo, you can expect the news potentially if we're god tier F1 minds and making predictions, which we shouldn't make, but that Maximilian Verstappen news will come out about his whereabouts in 2027 before the Dutch Grand Prix is going to get techie, chat. I can't wait. I mean, what a time to be an F1 fan, eh? It is going to get. There are very many news and F1 centric threads at which we need to pull going forth, and I'll be here and we'll be talking about it. Red Bull has upgrades coming. Yeah, I mean, but they've been saying that, Benzi, for the past bloody, you know what I mean? Pierre Vacher is, Benzi, what's the point? They promised Max upgrades again. It is laughable, Safa. Max seemed to be 4-time champion. I know we might have to retire the moniker at some point, but I will say it tongue in cheek. Yeah, you never know. In the weird and wacky world that is Formula One, strange things can and normally do happen. Anything can and usually does happen. In the words of the legend that is Murray Walker. You guys have been legends. Back same time tomorrow, 8 p.m, 10 a.m. in the morning. British. I appreciate each and every single one of you. Safak, you're a legend. Charles Edward Cheese, absolute legend. This broadcast is sponsored, as always, by the legend that is Charles Edward. I appreciate your support, all of your support ad infinitum, turning up, engaging my F1 nonsensory and my B-spec, my very B-spec noddy F1 mind. Between now and next time, as always, you guys have been legends. Remember to look, but never stare.